The Skinstructors tip of the week. If your client is struggling with melasma, remind them daily SPF isn't optional, it's medicinal. Melasma is a chronic condition with no permanent cure, but daily sun protection, broad spectrum SPF 30 plus, reapplied every 2 hours is your first and strongest defense. And yes, that includes cloudy days and window time.
Welcome back to the Skinstructors. I'm Jolie.
And I'm Morgan. Today we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood pigment disorders in aesthetics, melasma.
Yeah, and it's more than just dark patches. It's hormonal, emotional, and complex.
Whether you're new to aesthetics or a seasoned esthetician, you'll walk away from today with insight, empathy, and practical tools.
So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is melasma? Melasma is a chronic pigmentary disorder where brown or gray-brown patches appear on the face and sometimes other parts of the body. It's caused by overactive melanocytes, those pigment-producing cells in the skin. But unlike other types of hyperpigmentation, melasma is deeply tied to hormonal, genetic, and environmental factors.
And what's important to understand is that melasma isn't just sunspots or hyperpigmentation from acne, it's hormonally sensitive and it behaves differently depending on where it's located on the skin. There are 3 clinical types of melasma based on where the pigment sits. The first one is epidermal melasma. That's where pigment is going to be found in the upper layers of the skin, and this type often responds well to brightening agents. Next, we have dermal melasma, where that pigment is deeper in the skin in that dermal layer, making it more stubborn and harder to treat. And the last one is a mixed type, which is the most common, and that's where you're going to see that pigment in both layers.
You'll also hear about melasma patterns, which refer to where the patches show up on the face. First, we have the centrofacial pattern. This affects the forehead, cheeks, upper lip, nose, and chin. This is the most common one you'll see. Then we have the malar pattern. This is concentrated on the cheeks and the nose. And then we have the mandibular pattern. This appears along the jawline, more common in deeper skin tones and postmenopausal women.
And yes, melasma doesn't always stick to the face. We have extrafacial melasma, which shows up on the forearms or the neck. It's most common in postmenopausal women and women with high cumulative sun exposure. This is something estheticians should look out for when doing full body skin analysis.
From a professional standpoint, understanding the distribution and depth of melasma helps you set realistic expectations with your client. Epidermal pigment may respond in weeks. Dermal pigment may take months or may only improve with stability rather than full fading.
Also worth noting, melasma isn't limited to pregnant women, though we often hear it called the mask of pregnancy. While pregnancy is a common trigger due to hormonal shifts, melasma can be activated or worsened by oral contraceptives, hormone replacement therapy, thyroid conditions, or even just sun and heat exposure in genetically predisposed individuals.
And the numbers back that up. Melasma affects 1% of the general population, but in high-risk groups, particularly women with Fitzpatrick 3 through 6, it jumps to 9 to 50%. And family history plays a big role. 30 to 64% of people with melasma report that a family member also has it.
And that's huge. As estheticians, we're not diagnosing, but we are on the front lines. Spotting the signs of melasma early, understanding how it behaves, and building rapport with your client is key to long-term management and trust.
When it comes to melasma, one of the biggest questions we hear is, why do I have this? And the answer isn't simple. It's multifactorial, meaning multiple things contribute, often at the same time.
First, let's break it down. The root causes of melasma include genetics. If someone in your family has it, you're more likely to develop it, unfortunately. Also, hormones play a huge role. Pregnancy, birth control pills, hormone replacement therapy, and thyroid dysfunction can all trigger melasma. Then we have ultraviolet UV light. The sun is the biggest external driver. UVA and UVB and even visible light can worsen melasma. Heat and infrared exposure, so think hot yoga, steam rooms, cooking over a stove, even if there's no direct sun. Oxidative stress is also a root cause. This is damage to your cells from pollution, stress, poor sleep, or even poor diet. And lastly, inflammation and photo damage. Years of unprotected sun exposure and chronic low-grade inflammation can set the stage for melasma to develop.
Yeah, at the cellular level, there's a ton happening beneath the surface. It's not just the melanocytes working overtime, there's a full team of skin cells involved. Research shows there's crosstalk between melanocytes, those pigment producing cells, keratinocytes, those are the skin's building blocks, fibroblasts, the collagen producing cells, mast cells, which trigger inflammation, and endothelial cells, which are the blood vessel lining.
And all of those cells communicate using cytokines and growth factors. Think of it like a group chat that got way out of control. One signal for pigment turns into 20 messages. It's a biochemical cascade that ramps up melanin production and can lead to pigment being deposited deeply into the skin.
And then there's those pendulous melanocytes that literally are hanging into the dermis due to basement membrane damage. That means pigment is harder to remove because it's deeper than skincare can typically reach.
Plus senescent fibroblasts, which are the aging fibroblasts, they start pumping out inflammatory signals that make things worse. It's like the older cells are yelling at the younger ones to keep the chaos going.
What's fascinating is that hormones amplify this process. Estrogen and proestrogen can both stimulate melanogenesis, which is melanin production, especially when combined with sun exposure. That's why so many women first notice melasma during pregnancy or after starting hormonal birth control.
There's also new research on altered gene expression in melasma skin, specifically genes related to melanogenesis, the WNT signaling pathway, and lipid metabolism. It's not just external factors. It's how your skin is programmed to respond to those factors.
So, as estheticians, it's important to know melasma isn't just caused by not wearing sunscreen. It's hormonal, inflammatory, and often genetic. That's why education and empathy are so important. Clients often feel defeated, but when we explain the full picture, they feel seen and supported.
And as professionals, that knowledge helps us choose the right treatments, not just what's trendy, but what works for their skin and their biology.
So now that we know what causes melasma, let's zoom in literally. What does melasma look like under the microscope?
It's really fascinating and honestly a bit chaotic. In healthy skin, melanocytes produce melanin in a controlled, balanced way. But in melasma, that regulation breaks down and we see both structural and inflammatory changes. And let's break those down layer by layer. So the top skin layer, the epidermis, that has hypertrophic melanocytes. These are enlarged pigment cells that produce more melanin than normal. Then we have a melanosome overload, and that's when your melanosomes, those melanin packages, are transferred more aggressively to nearby keratinocytes, increasing pigmentation in that top layer, the epidermis. You have basement membrane damage, and that's when the structure that separates the epidermis from the dermis gets leaky or weakened, allowing that pigment to drop down into the deeper layers. And lastly, that pendulous melanocytes that you mentioned, Jolie, this is wild. Some melanocytes actually dangle into the dermis, which is not where they're supposed to be. That's one reason pigment becomes harder to treat. It's now in a zone where topical treatments just struggle to reach. Then we've got the dermal layer. This is the deeper layer of the skin. So in the dermis, we're seeing dermal melanin. And that's when pigment escapes the epidermis and can settle into the dermis, creating long-lasting discoloration that's resistant to surface treatment. Those mast cells get involved. Those are those inflammatory cells that can get activated, releasing histamine and other messengers that can worsen that pigmentation process. If we're noticing some solar elastosis, that UV damage, that can lead to fragmented, tangled collagen and elastin fibers, and it weakens the skin's architecture and makes it more prone to pigment changes. Senescent fibroblasts, those are those retired collagen producing cells that like to sneak up and tease the younger ones. They secrete harmful cytokines, keeping inflammation alive and well. And lastly, we have lymphohistiocytic infiltrates. That's basically an army of immune cells that show up trying to fix the problem, but they end up just fueling more pigment.
So what does that mean for us as estheticians? It means melasma is not just surface pigment. Even if your client sees patches on the skin, the changes go much deeper. Inflammation is chronic, pigment is both shallow and deep, and skin structure is often compromised.
Exactly. It also helps to explain why melasma is so stubborn. When pigment lives in the dermis, it can't be fully lifted with exfoliation or tyrosinase inhibitors alone. So we need to think long term and holistically, like supporting the skin barrier, that is a must, reducing inflammation, preventing new pigment formation, and lastly, strengthening the skin's architecture.
It's like remodeling a house. You can't just repaint the walls. You might need to fix the foundation, reroute the plumbing, and install better installation.
I love that analogy. Clients really want to see fast results always. But if we don't address what's happening underneath, we'll just keep chasing the same spots over and over again.
And the good news, understanding this complexity helps us to build a smarter, more effective strategy for treatment and for managing expectations from day one.
All right, let's take a pause from the science and talk about something just as important, how melasma affects people emotionally. Because let's be honest, it's not just a skin concern, it's a confidence disruptor.
Yeah. A 2024 cross-sectional study found that melasma has a significant psychological burden. In fact, 43% of melasma patients were diagnosed with clinical depression. Let that sink in. Nearly half of all melasma patients.
And it's not just depression. The Melasma, which is the Melasma Quality of Life Scale, has shown consistent results across 14 studies and with over 1,300 patients. The takeaway? Melasma negatively affects social life, self-esteem, and even job performance, regardless of age or education level.
What's especially important is that this emotional impact is often invisible to others. Friends or family might say, it's not that bad, or you can just cover it up. But for the person living with it, every reflection can feel defeating.
I had a client once say that they just didn't feel like themselves anymore, and it was so sad. It just really hit hard. Melasma can feel out of control. You're doing the right things, you're wearing SPF, you're avoiding those triggers, and still it returns.
This is where we as estheticians need to step up, not just with treatments, but with validation and empathy. Here's how. Never downplay it. Even if the patches are mild, their impact may not be. Let clients know they're not alone. This affects millions of people globally. Normalize the emotional aspect. Say something like, melasma can affect how we feel about ourselves. That's valid, and we're here to support you inside and out.
Build rapport and trust first. That's treatment step one.
Melasma is manageable with education and patience.
Okay, fellow Esties, that's a wrap on part 1 of our melasma deep dive.
In next week's episode, we'll cover the treatment blueprint, home care, pro treatments, and realistic expectations.
Make sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss it.
And as always, don't hesitate to educate.